In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make bonsai from root cuttings, steps you need to take to ensure their success, how you should work the subsequent roots which develop, steps you should take to prepare your pots before planting, how to anchor these root cuttings in position in their pots, what to do if you need to give them some added movement for interest. If you find the following content helpful, then you can thank me by clicking the thanks button just below the video. In the spring of 2022, I needed to do some root work on a Lagerstrumeria or crepe myrtle that I'd purchased as bag stock. Rather than discard of all the roots that I was able to cut off, I decided to use them. The main reason why it's a good idea to use root cutting material to produce new bonsai trees with is because of the movement in the stem that ultimately becomes the trunk. I would suggest that it's pretty near impossible to create or reproduce these kinds of curves using wire. So I selected a number of roots which looked like it had potential as new bonsai trees. And after selecting those that I want to work with, I then added some aluminium wire to them so that I could give them some added shape. Crepe myrtles tend to be fairly brittle when bending with wire, and so make sure that the wire supports the outsides of the bends, and it's also a good technique to twist as you're bending. It's not possible to expose the full length of the root cutting immediately, and so deeper containers are required. I chose these very deep plastic containers, and then using a very open structured frost draining soil mix, I planted the cuttings in these containers. To keep the stems moist, I also surrounded them with packed sphagnum moss. To keep the sphagnum moss packed securely to this exceptionally long root cutting, I needed to use some packaging film. The rest of the cuttings I prepared by just removing the roots that I didn't wish to keep, and then creating an interesting shape that I could foresee as becoming a bonsai tree. As many of these stems were a little bit shorter than the previous one, I was able just to clad or just to top off the top of the cuttings using the sphagnum moss. It's now been 2 years or 2 seasons since I started these root cuttings, and I'm very proud to say that all of them have taken very well. So the next step will be to remove them from these temporary containers, confirm the health of the roots, and then to carefully rake out the roots and remove the old growing medium. And then to remove some of the roots from the stems to expose the new line or the trunk line that I wish to keep and develop further as this bonsai tree. My focus here will be to avoid any straight lines wherever possible. You also want to make those decisive cuts which will enhance the taper in the trunk line. Be sure to go over your cuts with a blade, which will give you a nice crisp edge onto the cut, which will be easier for the plant to heal. I'm now going to prepare some Maruku or Japanese development containers to receive these cuttings that I'm working on. Take the time and effort to secure the drainage mesh over the hole, because this is going to prevent the soil from washing out the bottom. I also need to use wire tie downs to secure the cutting in place once I've planted it at the angle that I desire. Using a pair of pliers will give you a 90-degree bend, which will make a very clean fit to the pot between the wire and the pot. This will mean that the pot will not be disturbed or rocking at all when it's placed on the surface. Next, I've prepared some growing medium. This medium consists of 2 parts of akadama with 1 part pumice, the akadama acting as the main water-retaining component. There's also a small percentage of agricarb in the mix too. Be sure to use a sieve set to eliminate as much dust as possible before actually using the medium. Use a set of root picks or chopsticks if you prefer to settle the media in. And finally, seal the cuts using top gin sealer or your preferred sealer. Now I'm going to repeat that process pretty much with the others. With this root cutting, I'm going to try something a little bit different because there isn't enough interest in the root the way that it developed in the first place. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to wrap it with some parafilm, which is a breathable, perishable grafting film, and then wire it and then give it some additional movement. I can actually now immediately expose all of the portion of the stem that has been wrapped with a parafilm because that captures the moisture in and prevents it from drying out. This is the reason why root cuttings that are exposed too quickly die, because they lose moisture too quickly. The root portions of a crepe myrtle seem to be a little bit more flexible than the growth above the ground, and so whilst it's still possible, I'm going to give some very exaggerated curves and twists in the movement of this plant. This is the result of some of the cuttings that I completed. Now for these root cuttings, which I did 1 year ago, I followed a slightly different course. Rather than bury these root cuttings in a container with growing medium, I just simply wrapped them with parafilm instead. It seems to me that the thicker ones were the ones that fared best, with the very thin roots dying out. I was particularly chuffed with the way that this one came out, and I'm confident it's going to make for a very interesting bonsai tree in the near future. If you found that content helpful and you'd like to thank me for it, please do so now by clicking the thanks button just below the video. So I prepared a slightly smaller but deeper container to receive these cuttings. There were no wire tie-down holes in these containers, and so I had to make a different solution. Of course, if I had a little bit more time, I would have drilled holes using a diamond core bit and a little bit of water. So that brings me to the end of today's video, introducing you into perhaps 2 ways of doing root cuttings. It's definitely a great way of making interesting bonsai trees using material which probably would have been thrown away anyway. These cuttings will also possess the exact same genetics as the parent plant, and so if it's a flowering species, as these are, it will immediately start flowering and the shade of the flower color will be exactly the same. Thanks very much for joining me. If you haven't done so yet, please do like and subscribe to my channel for more videos. I upload a new video every second Friday. Till next time, take care and goodbye.